I really needed somewhere to vent about this story that happened to me years back. I'm 32 now, but this happened when I was about 14, so roughly about 2003, back when we used to have a landline phone. I used to live in a two-storey house in Langley Falls with my mum. My dad had passed away when I was about 2 years old, so she was the only one raising me. My best friend, Pete, lived next door to me and we went to the same school, so he would come to my house from time to time, but Pete did do the stupidest shit and would always end up getting us into trouble one way or the other. Just a couple of weeks earlier, we'd gone to an abandoned house a couple of towns over, and I ended up going through an old wooden floor and fracturing my foot. Well, this particular day, Pete came over to my house after school, and usually I'd go over to his house, but as I said, I'd hurt my foot, so I didn't really want to walk that much. And we played on the Nintendo 64 for a bit, and then played some other games until we got bored of it. We were out of ideas until Pete suggested that we prank call some random numbers. So we did. We did a few takeaways and things like that in town, and me, being the dumbass 14-year-old that I was, thought it was a great idea, and I was having a ball. It was so much fun. But it was until everything went from 0 to 100 real quick. First, we prank called Domino's and asked if we could get a pizza with hot dogs, bananas, no cheese and no sauce, and then they hung up on us and we couldn't stop laughing. 20 minutes of doing this and we were having a great time, but then Pete suggested we punch in some random phone number and call them and see who picked up. And so we did. And we did this at least 6 times. One time was a law office, a random house in Canada, and a disconnected number, and a few other random ones. And then the last time we called, I wish we'd have stopped because I regret it so much. I suggested that we did 3 single-digit numbers and punched them into the phone. So I put 999 666 6666 and I pressed call. Right after, we heard a loud beep on the phone. There was no dial, just beeping. And for whatever reason, it wouldn't let me hang up. We just thought nothing of it. Until eventually, in a dark tone, I heard a voice say, "You've reached MMD. Please input your 2-digit code." 2-digit code? What is that? Hotline. But trust me, this was no ordinary phone number. I put in 11, 22, 33, and all different kinds of combinations, and it finally let me at 65. But I wish I hadn't have done that. Why, may you ask? Well, it was right afterwards I heard this. "Hello 212, you've reached MMD. However, I know that you are not one of our clients. Your phone number is not the one we assigned to you at day 1. You are now on Sniper Watch. You will now die within 48 hours. You've made a great mistake in calling this number." After he said that, the phone line went dead. The look on my friend's face was terrifying. I was so pale. I just felt so numb. I wanted to faint. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't tell my mum because she was at work. I couldn't even call the police because the phone line was dead. I couldn't call anyone, and I couldn't get out of the house because my foot was hurting too much, and Pete was losing his shit. We both were. We were questioning what we'd just heard on the phone, if I was really going to die, and if it was just a prank or what. Quite quickly, the numbness wore off for both of us and the fear set in, so Pete helped me walk and we got our shit together and went to our neighbour's house. An old man lives there. He was about 65. That used to be a police officer in our local police department, and he solved numerous crimes and busts and murders, and he knows his stuff. So we knocked on his door excited, thinking that this might be a way of getting some help, but no answer. We knocked again, still no answer, and again, still no answer. And although the door was unlocked, considering he was his age, maybe he couldn't get there in time. My mother hadn't talked about him in a week, because she talks to him quite regularly, but we didn't take that into consideration. We really should have never opened that door. As soon as we got in, the overpowering stench of sewage filled our noses. It smelt like absolute death, and it was so terrible. We had to cover our mouths and faces with our shirts. When we walked in, we were greeted by his week-old, decomposing corpse staring right at us. He was bloated, bugs flying everywhere, and his eyes had rotted to the point that they came right out of their sockets. And he'd been shot in the head, right through the window. We screamed for what felt like hours. One thing I noticed right before I left was on the wall in huge red handwriting I saw 212. It was just too much. The stench, the body, I just puked, and I ran out there with Pete, and we went to another neighbour's house. We slammed on their door for 5 minutes, and yet again no one answered, and yet again the door was unlocked, and yet again we went in. This neighbour had also been shot in the head through the window, and again on the wall, massive red handwriting, 212. We couldn't process this. We were just too young and shocked. 2 neighbours are dead, but then the realisation sunk in. If both of them are dead, what about Pete's family? Will they have been murdered too? We went straight to his house and he opened the door, but thankfully nothing had happened. But nobody was home. The car was in the driveway, but nobody was home. He went to his backyard, but when he looked out of the window, he saw a note on his fence. 212, we will take everything you love, everybody you know, in your family, your neighbours, familiars. Everybody that can be discussed about this matter will be gone, and your family is in good hands of ours now, but you will never see them again. MMR. When Pete saw this note, he went completely pale. His family was gone, and now he has nobody. We couldn't talk about this to anyone. Somehow, they had predicted that we would call their number. So, before we did, they killed every person we know. So we can't talk about our experience. My mother never returned home from work that day. And ever since then, I've been working on myself to support myself and living in a little apartment complex with a cheap rent. It isn't the best place. I haven't talked to Pete in years. We stopped talking many years ago. I'm still haunted by the fact that knowing one phone call took away everything from me. My mum, my friends, my family, everything. The incident was eventually investigated and was dubbed a serial murder case. I don't even think that number exists anymore, but please, if you want to keep yourself and your family and your sanity safe, don't call.